Hello everyone, welcome to the very first episode of the Half-Truth podcast. I am your host, Nick Van Ryswick. Today we're going to be talking about one of the strangest stories in history that is actually recorded. We have lots of documented reports of this story. It's pretty hard to believe. It's a wild one, so get ready. Let's dive right into it. This took place all the way back in 1518. July 14 was the exact day that this all began, and this was in a place called Strasbourg, a Holy Roman Empire back in the day. A small town, it's not a huge empire, but today that's modern day France. One village, if you will, in France, because this was not that big of a place, and back then, not a huge population. Cobblestone streets in this town. It was July, so it was very hot. The sun was shining down on the cobblestone, and back then, pretty common for a lot of people to be baking outside and cooking and smoking meats, so there was lots of smells going through the air of these narrow streets with timber and cobblestone houses lining the sides of these streets, so not much room to walk around. There was horses was the main form of transportation back then, so along with the great smells of baking breads and cooking meats, there was also manure lining the streets pretty much everywhere you'd go, so kind of a nasty smell and a great smell, so lots of things going on in the air. One summer day, July 14, 1518, there was an ordinary woman named Frau Troffea. She was a hard-working homemaker. She stayed home, took care of the house. She baked, made dinner, made lunch, made all the food, and cleaned constantly. It was hard work. You could really tell by looking at her face. She was exhausted. She's been working hard for years, and it was taking a toll. And at the time, it was a hot summer day, and she's been working all day, and her friends and anyone that knew her would look at her, and they could tell she was really feeling it. And the hard work of taking care of the house and the garden and making food was taking a toll on her that day in particular. She walked outside, and there was no music going on, there was no concerts or anything out of the ordinary. There was a lot of chatter, there was merchants in the street, neighbors talking to each other, and just like if you were to go into your local downtown area, if you live near one, there's lots of people talking and you can hear chatter going on, and that's all that was going on. There was no street performers or music of any kind, and she walked out, and on her way to the middle of those cobblestone streets, she started a little skip, and she hopped her way to the middle. She started throwing her arms from side to side, spinning in circles, and she just jumped right into a dance. And she started dancing in the middle of the street, and nobody around her was playing music. She wasn't listening to any music. She just started dancing, and everybody around her thought, oh, that's fun. She's just in a really cheerful mood, dancing in the middle of the street. Nobody really paid much attention to it yet, but she was throwing her arms around, spinning in circles, jumping up and down, and dancing unrelentlessly, really. And her husband, let's call him Tom, he was at home at the time and realized that his wife had gone outside, and so he stepped out to the front door and checked it out and saw that she was dancing, and he was pretty confused, and it was a hot summer day. I mean, it is in the 80s. The sun is blaring down on the streets. Frau was already sweating because she's been dancing for several minutes, and she's a middle-aged woman. She's not in amazing physical condition, so that's taking a toll on her, and she's already exhausted, and people know that. So her husband, Tom, walked out into the street and just said, "What are you doing? Why are you dancing? It is scorching hot out here. Take it easy. Come back inside." And she didn't acknowledge him. She didn't pay attention. She didn't listen. She didn't say anything, and she just kept dancing. Tom was confused by this. His wife is usually pretty responsive. They're pretty close. They have quite a good relationship. So her not responding to him really threw him off guard, and at first, honestly, kind of upset him. He was a patient guy in general, but it was pretty disrespectful, and it kind of upset him. And he actually grabbed her arm, gave her a little shake, and come on, tried to pull her back inside. "Frau, what are you doing? Come inside." And she just kept moving, flailing her arms and dancing. She didn't do anything. And then people that write about this and documentation that we have about this story say that Fru's gaze and her eyes looked at Tom and looked at other people around, people that wrote about this. And they say her gaze was vacant. It's like she wasn't there. She was looking at you, but not looking at you. She was looking right through you. And her eyes, it's like nothing was there. So she looked at Tom with that presentless gaze, and it really kind of freaked Tom out. He backed away and he said, "I don't know why you're dancing. It's so hot out here. I don't get it." And he just backed up and watched her as she continued. And she just kept dancing. This went on for 30 minutes, an hour. And then after another hour, Tom came out. He tried again. "Fru, what are you doing? Why are you still dancing? You are exhausted. It is scorching hot out here. Come inside, get a drink, sit down, take a rest. What's going on?" And she just didn't respond, and she did not stop dancing. She kept going, and Tom did not know what to do. At this point, Tom tried again and grabbed her so tight, and he was not a frail guy. He went out, chopped down trees, he split and chopped the firewood. He was like a big dude. He was not some frail, weak guy. And holding on to Fru, trying to stop her from dancing, he just couldn't. No matter how hard he tried, she would dance out of his arms. She couldn't stop dancing, and he could only hang on to her for a few seconds before it was just too much, and she started flailing her arms and shaking and spinning around all over again. He couldn't do anything to stop her, and she was not listening to him at all. By this time, hours went by. Tom was standing to the side by their house on the side of the street, just staring at her, wondering what the heck is going on. And after hours have gone by, other people started taking attention to her dancing in the street. It was getting to be pretty late in the evening at this point, so Tom knew, like, it's gonna come to be time for bed and we gotta go inside, and nothing was changing still. And by now, people on the street were kind of giving Fru some weird looks and not really understanding what she was doing. Like, is this lady crazy? She's been dancing for hours. What the heck's going on? By sundown, Tom was thinking, it is getting late. It's time for bed. I'm going to try one more time. So he went out, talked to Fru. Again, she was not responsive. She may have looked at Tom, but just looked right through him. It's like she wasn't there at all, and all while still moving and dancing constantly. And after all this hours, you could tell she looked exhausted, and she was drenched in sweat at this point, but nothing was changing. She just kept dancing, not listening to Tom, not going inside for a break, and it did not seem like she was gonna go inside to sleep. Tom went back to their front door, laid down on the cobblestone street, and just watched Fru dance, not knowing what else to do. And he just waited. Eventually, it got to be the middle of the night. Fru is still dancing. There's less people walking around. She's pretty much the only one out there on the cobblestone street, and Tom just could not stay awake any longer. He's still outside watching, but he fell asleep. A few hours later, Tom woke up. Fru is there, still dancing. Every now and then, Tom or someone else would notice Fru fall to the ground, and Tom would get excited, run up to her and say, "Are you done? Are you done? Come on inside, take a break." But she would get back up about 30 seconds later and continue dancing. It's like her body couldn't handle it anymore, couldn't keep dancing, so it would collapse. But then her mind could not quit. So as soon as her body had enough strength to get back up, she would stand up and continue on dancing like nothing ever happened or changed. Tom was just giving up at this point. He didn't know what to do. He had his own responsibilities to go take care of. He had to work, but he didn't want to just leave her there dancing in the street. So he just didn't know what to do. He didn't go to work. He just stayed home and kept watching her. And by now, it's been a full day. People have been really standing by and watching Fru dance, and something pretty strange started to happen. After about 2 days of dancing, and this has been going on, people started joining Fru dancing in the street. At first, it was to play, maybe fit in, and maybe make Fru feel better because it looked like she was not doing very well, so they started tapping their feet, shaking their arms a little bit, and they started dancing. But then once they started dancing, and this was just 3 or 4 people at this point, they couldn't stop. Again, just like Fru, they wouldn't stop, and they kept dancing for hours and hours. And the group grew to about a dozen people. After 2 or 3 days, there was a dozen people out there with Fru, all dancing. Many people at this point watched with confusion, wondering, what the heck is going on? Why is there a group of people dancing out here 24/7, just nonstop? And Tom was becoming extremely worried about his wife, and all the more confused when more people started encouraging her and dancing along with her, and nobody was stopping. After 2 or 3 days of nonstop dancing, Fru's feet were blooded and blistered and looked honestly terrible. And in this time, 15-18 was the year. They didn't have brand new Nikes and Adidas like we do. They had thin shoes, and Fru's feet were frankly looking disgusting, and Tom was just horrified, and she was still dancing, and people dancing with her at this point have been dancing for a day or more. Their feet were also starting to bleed. The cobblestone streets started just having blood footprints all over them, and there was blisters, and it was so hot. It smelled like dirty, bloody feet. It was disgusting. And they're obviously in pain. They can't just not be in pain when they have blistered and bloodied feet and they're dancing constantly. After this long, people started noticing that Fru and the other people dancing with her all of a sudden would holler, "Help me, help me stop." And they would continue to dance. They couldn't stop, but they would holler and yell for help, and they would want to stop. But they would keep going, and nothing would change. People wondered, why are they not stopping, and why are they shouting for help but can't stop? And even if they grabbed them and tried to shake sense into them and tell them to just cut it out, just sit down, take a break, get a drink, eat some food, they wouldn't. They wouldn't stop, even for a drink of water. The people that were dancing wouldn't stop moving, but their friends and family were trying to give them water and food throughout, just to keep them going, because they were not taking any breaks. People were beginning to be pretty scared, because when they heard people yell to help them, help, and they wouldn't stop dancing, they knew like something was off. Something is obviously not right if they're not stopping, but they're yelling for help because they want to stop, but nothing was changing. Something was not right, and people were starting to get pretty freaked out. A few more days passed, and we're a week in by now, and the group has grown. People started joining and dancing, and it grew from 1 dozen to 4 to 5 dozen people a week in. We're talking a group of 50 people dancing in the streets. They're all dancing uncontrollably, unrelentlessly, scorching hot sun, bleeding, blistering feet. They're all just dancing, and nobody can stop them, and nobody knows why. There's no music. There's no beat. There's no singing. Have you ever been to a silent concert where you wear headphones and everybody dances, but there's no music? Everybody just has music in their headphones. So if you take your headphones off, you just hear everybody's feet shuffling around and deep breathing and everybody just dancing, but to nothing, and it just seems so strange. Well, that's what was going on, but there was no headphones. Nobody had music. People watching were so confused because all they saw were people shuffling around, bloodied and blistered feet, heavy breathing. They were exhausted and sweaty, to no music at all. It was such a strange sight to see. The town's leaders started getting pretty concerned at this point. They started thinking how they can fix this, and they started asking doctors, what can they do? And a well-known doctor in this town came up with the theory of hot blood, and that's what was going on. These people had a hot blood. They were overheating from the sun, and to cure this hot blood, they needed to move and keep dancing and moving to cool off. So their brains just told them, move, keep dancing, and their brains wouldn't let them stop moving because they needed to cool off from this hot blood. So the doctor said to cure this hot blood, you needed to just keep moving, and so he encouraged everyone to just keep doing what they were doing. The town's leaders were confused by this, but They didn't have any other opinions at the time, and they just thought they should embrace it. 2 or 3 weeks went on, and by now there is a huge group of people. There's several written documents from doctors, preachers, towns leaders. A lot of the documents say there was anywhere between 200 and 400 people dancing in the streets. The town's leaders, to try to fix this, came up with the idea of hiring professional bands for music, as well as professional dancers to go join up with people dancing, grab their hands and dance with them to try to at least comfort them as they were dancing. And they built a wooden stage to embrace this, a raised wooden stage. And they encouraged people to go up on stage and continue dancing to cure them of the hot blood that the doctors came up with. And at this time, 2 or 3 weeks in, the worst possible scenario started happening. With all these people dancing, and they were continually dancing for days on end, weeks on end, scorching hot, and they were not stopping for breaks to eat or drink while their family was trying to give them food and water. They weren't stopping moving, so it was very difficult. People started dancing to their deaths. One by one, people started collapsing. An elderly man had a stroke while he was dancing. 1 second he was dancing, the next second he had a stroke and he died. A woman had a heart attack as she was dancing. Her heart stopped, it couldn't take any more. There were men, women, and children all on the street dancing, and all of them, men, women, and children, started falling to their deaths. The encouragement of dance until you cure your hot blood obviously was a horrible plan, and it was spreading the dancing like wildfire. More and more people started dancing, and more people started falling to their deaths because they couldn't stop dancing and they couldn't handle it anymore. Their hearts were giving out. They couldn't breathe. They were overheating. They were dying of starvation. They just couldn't handle it. Finally, the town's leaders needed to do something and decided to take action, and they took these carts, wooden carts with walls around them. Obviously, they're pulled by horses, and they can fit up to, 15, 20 people in these carts with space. They didn't want to jam the people in there because they're still dancing. The people that looked like they were in the roughest shape, they grabbed them and dragged them on to these carts. They loaded up 15 or 20 people onto these carts. They're still moving, and some are so close to death. They may be curled up, shriveled on the cart in a ball, but all the while they're still moving. They might be shaking their arm and still dancing, even though they are so close to death. They took these carts one after another, loaded them up, and went to a mountaintop. This mountaintop was a shrine for someone called Saint Vitus. The townspeople believed Saint Vitus was a god, if you will, of dancing, and Saint Vitus could cure or inflict dancing, unrelentless dancing, or epilepsy or seizures onto people. Saint Vitus lived in the 4th century, all the way back in 300 AD, and was a young boy, 12 or 13 years old, and he was in the Christian faith, and he was a martyr for his Christian faith. Back when he was 12 or 13, he was tortured brutally and killed for his faith. But even back then, people believed he had the power to inflict or cure unrelentless dancing, epilepsy, or seizures. And since he was a martyr and died for his faith, this legend of Saint Vitus hung around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And even now, in the year 1518, people believed Saint Vitus was a saint of dancing and could inflict this. So some people thought he was inflicting the dancing on these people because the people disappointed him with their sin and evil acts in the town. So this mountaintop was a shrine for Saint Vitus, and they were taking the people there by cart, dropping them off, and there were priests and other townspeople. They were praying over them. They had little crosses they were holding to their foreheads, and they were doing everything they could to get them to stop. It was also a legend that with Saint Vitus, if you had red shoes, it was a sacrifice to Saint Vitus. And so the priests and townspeople started collecting red shoes and putting them on these dancers to try to appease Saint Vitus. After multiple days of praying, multiple days of the priests performing rituals on these dancers and holding crosses up and putting the red shoes on these dancers, many, many days and more deaths. People kept falling to their deaths out of exhaustion and starvation and dehydration. After all this and many more deaths, the bodies were just piling up. It was horrible. It finally came to an abrupt end. People just stopped. Many people died, and it was too late, but there were many still living that stopped dancing just as sudden as they started dancing. And there were still people in the streets that hadn't made it to the mountaintop yet. They stopped as well. It was finally quiet. There was no more shuffling around with bloodied and blistered feet. There were no more bodies falling to their death. And nobody could really understand what caused everything to stop. But nobody even really knew what caused it to start in the first place. So the people that lived limped back to their homes because they were in utter exhaustion and pain, and their feet were blistered and bruised and black and blue from blood pooling, and they were so close to death, but they lived. They limped back to their homes, and they were confused. They didn't really know what happened. The people that unfortunately did not live, their bodies were piled up, and their families started dragging their bodies into burials and having services to respect their loved ones who passed away due to uncontrollable dancing that danced them into their own grave, quite literally. So what really went on here? What the heck happened? Why did people dance themselves to death uncontrollably and nobody could do anything about it? A few of the most common theories are as follows. The first is Ergot poisoning. Rye bread was very common in the time. Everybody baked their own rye bread and everybody ate rye bread. And ergot is a fungus that can grow on rye bread when it becomes moist or it's stored in just a damp cabinet, and that fungus can grow, and it's called ergot. And ergot can cause hallucinations and convulsions and just uncontrollable spasms. However, ergot also usually causes the failure of limbs and just weakness and just falling because you're so weak. Quite the opposite of uncontrollable dancing with energy for days to be able to sustain the dance. So many people say that couldn't be, but it is a theory that it could be ergot from rye bread, that people started getting the poisoning and it caused hallucinations and convulsions that started making it look like they were dancing uncontrollably and led to their death. Another common theory is a mass psychogenic illness. This could be caused from extreme stress, illnesses maybe going around, like syphilis was common in that time, famine, as well as extreme superstition, which was common in that time with Saint Vitus, for example, the dancing saint who could just force people to dance. And there was extreme superstition about this, so the claim was a psychogenic illness. One person started maybe having a seizure, Frau, for example, in the street and started having convulsions, and she was stressed. She was obviously going through a lot. She might have been sick or hungry and obviously very hot from the heat at that time, and she started going through a mental breakdown. And the theory is other people with superstitions about Saint Vitus, and they were already in the middle of a famine and there was sickness going around and disease. All that just mentally was so much that they just convinced themselves that the dancing was being forced on them. They started dancing, and more people fell into that trap of a psychogenic illness of convincing their own brain that they were stuck dancing because of Saint Vitus and because of any of these other reasons. They convinced themselves, and their brain was so convinced by their own deceptions and thinking that they truly did just get stuck dancing until their bodies couldn't handle it and fell to their death. Another common theory that a lot of religious people may connect with is demonic spirits. A lot of priests in the time, and There is written sermons from priests and preachers during that time period where they are sure that demons took over the control of these bodies and forced these people to dance. And of course, demons want you to suffer and die, so they just forced these people to dance until their feet started bleeding and had blisters, and they just were suffering and screaming for help. Every now and then they would just yell, "Help, help, please help me stop dancing." And they couldn't, and until their bodies just could not handle it. And many people believed that this was the cause for this whole ordeal, was demonic spirits. This was a long time ago, so we may never actually know what happened and why it happened, but there is a lot of written documentation from preachers, doctors, towns leaders, chronicles back from that time. So it's pretty incredible, the written proof that we have, and they're very descriptive and they all match up. It's pretty certain to say this story is true, and I am very curious to hear from you what you think caused this to happen and what you think really went down back in the year 1518. So please let me know down below in the comments. I am eager to hear from all of you. And if you're just joining now in 2026 watching this video, this is the first video on this channel. I'm hoping to bring you many more stories similar to this one. So please hit that subscribe button and join for more videos in the future. We'll see you then.